tremendous power in storytelling to communicate the experience of one person to the experience of another person without the mediation of music or set or lights, relatively speaking, the props I bought at the Michaels, you know. Without very much, it is an opportunity to communicate the experience of one person to another group of people to make them understand it in a way that I don't think is capable in any other medium. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Sarah Steele.
Shower with my brother. Don't make it weird, Matt. Little kids bathe together. We were little kids. And my brother looks at me and he says, "Hey, Sarah, I dare you to throw up." And I did. I threw up all over my brother. I didn't have to stick my finger down my throat and really think about it. It just happened. It was like some weird little kid superpower that I just discovered. I've never talked about my eating disorder in public before, but you know, I figured an audience of 75 some odd strangers and the whole internet is a great place to start. Here we go. The 3 most common types of eating disorders are anorexia nervosa, BED, or binge eating disorder, and bulimia nervosa. And I've done all 3 because apparently I'm an overachiever. I'm walking down the hallway of my elementary school. I've got my favorite book, Hank the Cowdog, in one arm, and the new edition of Weight Watchers in the other. Little Sarah was a chubby, funny, as I've told you before, and a 2-foot pumpkin, commonly and sometimes referred to as Big Sarah. I'm 10 years old, people, and already trying really hard to not be fat. Weight Watchers. Weight Watchers was a system where different foods amounted for different points. So, for example, celery, which is gross, was 2 points. Whereas pizza, which is delicious, was like a bajillion points. You get it. And I wanted pizza. Now, I had a strange relationship with food. It was always, we were always breaking up and then getting back together, and my friends always wanted to hang out with them after a show, or my family was inviting me over for Thanksgiving all the time. I could never get away from that delicious jerk. But back to Weight Watchers. 10 years old, I was doing Weight Watchers with my mom, my aunt, my grandma, which is weird. It wasn't really working, which led to this one time when my grandma took us to see this crazy evangelist preacher who threw salt at us, and he tried to pray the fat away from our bodies. He was a faith healer for fat people. Now, luckily and thankfully, anorexia didn't stick. Anorexia is one of the highest, has the highest mortality rate than any other mental illness. Bulimia, however, did for 10 years. My brother and I and his friend are going to the movies. We get into the theater and I sit down, I've got my large popcorn and my large Diet Coke. And my brother's friend, who is a little bit older than me, I kind of had a crush on at the time, leans over and says, "Sarah, you've always had a pretty face, but I wouldn't touch you unless you lost 15 pounds. I don't remember what movie we watched that day. We get back to my parents' house and my mom calls us to dinner. We were having spaghetti. I do remember that. I sit down and I finish my first plate and then I go to get seconds. But when I looked at the food back at my brother's nice friend, I couldn't stop thinking about those 15 pounds. Not just that, but a lot of comments made about my weight throughout the years. the endless hours of trying to pray the fat away, for Jesus to come down and take it all, which is crazy. But also, mainly my desire to be small Sarah. I excused myself from the table, and I walked down the hallway. I got to the bathroom door, and I put my hand on it. I was 13 years old when I started being bulimic. Being bulimic. Like you become something else. But you kind of do. I was 180 pounds when I was 13 years old. And as someone said so perfectly before, when you are thin and develop an eating disorder, you go to the hospital and hopefully get the treatment that you need. But when you are fat, you're a success story. Ironically, my first job was at the grocery store. I would get 30 minutes for lunch, and this gave me enough time to drive home, eat a graphic amount of pizza rolls, get rid of it, and then go back to work. This one time, my mom got home early, and I'd gotten sick, and the toilet overflowed, and I got caught. My mom was really upset and really scared, and she was crying, and I was crying, but she told me that it was okay, that she would clean it up, and that I should get back to work, that we would talk about it later. After that, I didn't throw up at home anymore. I started throwing up at work instead, or behind the dumpster in front of my house. My parents tried to give me the help that I needed very early. However, eating disorders are still extremely misunderstood and rarely talked about. When you have an eating disorder, you feel extremely alone and isolated. The disease feels embodied, like you're a cancer almost to everyone around you, an energy. When people don't understand something, but they want to help you so bad and they don't know how, they'll ask you, can you not just stop? I'm walking down the sidewalk, and I arrive at the KSU Psychological and Social Services Center. I had been in therapy for a while, and my case manager had hooked me up with some amazing resources, a nutritionist, doctors, a woman who would go with me to the commons and help me eat a normal-sized meal. Because let me explain how recovery is kind of strange for a person with an eating disorder. Because get this, the recovery is to eat normally. It is the only physical addiction where you actually have to consume the substance that you are addicted to, or you will die. When I got to her office this time, there was a woman that I didn't recognize who started asking me a lot of personal questions, and she gave me a test to take. On the test, the question was, how many times a day are you binging and purging? And I stopped and thought about what might be a reasonable amount. So I wrote 5 to 8. But in reality, it was more like 10 or 15. I lied, and I thought that lie would get me off the hook. But no. 5 to 8 times a day is not okay or healthy. It's very dangerous. This woman told me that I should immediately withdraw from school and enter an inpatient treatment program. But I'd seen, girl interrupted. I was having none of it. I ran to my car, and I got in and started wondering if they were going to kick me out of school for what I had just told them. Are they going to come pick me up in some white van and cart me off to rehab against my will? No, that didn't happen. And I didn't start treatment that day the way they wanted me to. I did, however, do the most basic white girl thing I've probably ever done. I went straight to the cat's meow and I got a meaningful tattoo. So my recovery wasn't exactly traditional, but it was my recovery. Eating disorders are terribly tragic mental disorders. They're not a lifestyle. They're not something that we choose. They're caused by a variety of factors. They're caused by casual cruelty or genetics or casual ignorance. But that's not okay, because I think we can do better. I know we can. Little girls are finding out way too young and boys, that their bodies and weight and appearance is sometimes more important than their minds and feelings or their lives. I am so grateful to every single person who has contributed to my recovery. I've forgiven every single person who accidentally contributed to an illness that tried to take a peaceful life away from me, because it's not their fault. I've also forgiven myself.